Welcome to this week's episode of Two Guys on Politics with co-host former Illinois Congressman Bill Lipinski and myself, columnist at the Southwest News newspaper group and the Arab News newspaper. It is July 18, 2025. This is season 4, episode 18. And Two Guys on Politics is broadcast on the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 radio, as well as on YouTube at twoguysonpolitics.com. We invite you to subscribe to get the latest episodes and keep up with our weekly discussions on all the news and controversies facing our country here in the United States. My co-host for this radio show and podcast is Bill Lipinski. Bill served as Democratic Committeeman, Alderman of Chicago's 23rd Ward. Lipinski was elected to Congress in 1983 and served through 2005. He currently writes the Right from the Center opinion column at the Southwest News newspaper group. And I covered Chicago City Hall from 1976 through 1992, where I met Bill. And I write the mainstream opinion column for the Southwest News newspaper group on regional politics, as well as columns and news on Arab American issues for ArabNews.com in the Middle East. We have several topics on our news show today. Segment 1, we'll talk about Trump taking a backlash from his own party over brushing aside resolving the details of the Jeffrey Epstein case. This is the case that he really turned into a federal case. The open rebellion also by one of his Republican MAGA supporters, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, and about 6 other Republicans. They forced Trump to reverse course on the Epstein controversy that he tried to shut down. And in segment 1, we'll be talking with Bill Lipinski on his latest column on faith and how things have improved since the 1940s and 1950s, but that there's been a loss in faith, however, since that time in recent years. Segment 2, we're going to talk about the challenges facing Netanyahu's government with the religious party, which is threatening to break up his ruling coalition over a law that would require religious Orthodox Jewish citizens in Israel to serve in the Israeli military, and Netanyahu's latest war in Syria. And during that segment, we'll talk about my column on why I favor Robin Kelly, Congresswoman Robin Kelly, to succeed retiring Senator Dick Durbin over challengers and rivals Juliana Stratton, the lieutenant governor, backed by J.B. Pritzker, and by Raja Krishna Murthy. I guess all I need to do is say Raja because that's all anybody knows about him. So we'll be talking about all that, and we're going to take a break first and come back and begin our discussion. So right now, let's take a break, and we'll be right back right after these messages. And welcome back to Two Guys on Politics with former Illinois Congressman Bill Lipinski and myself, Ray Hanania, here live on YouTube and on WNZK AM 690 radio, broadcasting out of Michigan. Our first segment, Bill, there's this, when Jeffrey Epstein died, there was a big Republican push to blame the Democrats, that saying that maybe something happened to him, maybe he was murdered in prison. I mean, this guy gets killed. He commits suicide in prison. There's a 3-minute gap in the video of his prison cell that just disappeared. It's almost like Watergate. But it was Trump when Biden was president that made it such a big deal, saying that they were hiding something. The Democrats were hiding something. Then he becomes president and he pushes the whole thing aside. Now members of his own Republican Party are demanding that he release everything and talk about it, to the point where the Wall Street Journal published a letter, I guess, where they said he was praising Epstein and drawing pictures of naked women in the letter that he sent to Epstein. And now Trump is threatening to sue the Wall Street Journal, which is a Republican publication. Bill, what's going on with the Republican Party? It just,
Well, it's just the Trump chaos continues.
Yeah.
One of the amazing aspects of this is that two people who pushed the conspiracy that there's all these Democrats on this list someplace that participated in being pedophiles with our man who committed suicide. Okay. Now, those two people now today are the head of the FBI and the assistant director of the FBI. I used to listen to the second guy. Uh,
Bongino, is that his name?
yeah, right.
Bongino, right?
And he seemed like a reasonable, rational individual, except when he was promoting this Epstein conspiracy by the Democrats. Okay. Now that he's in power and now that his president wants the whole thing to go away, he doesn't have anything to say about it. Neither is the head of the FBI. They're just sitting there waiting to take their instructions from the attorney general, who actually they do work for. But very rarely are they subservient to the attorney general. Normally, the FBI charts their own course. Uh, as I say, it's just more chaos for Trump. What do I think? I think it's a diversion myself. I don't really see what difference it makes. If there was any real well-known people on a list someplace, I think the Biden administration would have released the Republicans that were on that list. All right. And I firmly believe if there were any big name Democrats on that list, I'm sure Trump would want to release those names. I don't think that there is any list, okay? I think it's all been created by Donald Trump and his supporters when he was out of power. That's my position in regards to this.
This is like the Kennedy assassination, the conspiracy theories. When information is not fully presented to the public, it's left to our imagination and people who exploit the issue for political purposes. But it is also a little bit like the Watergate controversy, because in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, who I think died in 2019 or was murdered, I'm not sure what happened to him. This guy, apparently, when you see the photos, there were famous Democrats and famous Republicans who would go out to this island for the most sordid type of activity involving the abuse of young girls. This guy, David Epstein, was horrible, but for some reason, all these people, the Prince of Britain, Prince Andrew, was out there many times
And
having.
he settled too. He settled with the woman who he allegedly abused. So I'm sure that he was guilty of whatever they charged him with.
Yes, and then, but Bill Clinton was there many times. Donald Trump was there many times. Now we're talking about in the 80s and 90s when these guys were, it was like the disco era and dancing and women and all kinds of free sex, blah, blah, blah. It was a different time. But for some reason now, Epstein's arrest and the women who were his victims are older. They came out, they accused him. After they accused him, he was arrested. He was then in jail. And while he was in jail, the next morning we were told, oh, he committed suicide. What about all the celebrities and big shot politicians who were his buddies, who traveled on his plane? How many times some did it more, some did it less? Trump was like, there are pictures of him dancing with, Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein. So it was Democrats and Republicans. And it was when the Democrats were in trouble, they were pointing fingers at the Republicans. Now, I mean, when the Democrats were in power, they were pointing fingers at the Republicans. Now that the Republicans are in power, they started pointing fingers at the Democrats to win votes. But now that Trump's in office, he's one of the key players. He doesn't
Oh,
want to talk
yes.
about this at all. There's actually 3 minutes missing. There's been investigations into this videotape, and they said that it was edited by some software. They took out 3 minutes of how the cameras suddenly went out at a certain time when he died. and they said, oh, he hung himself in his prison.
That was just like the uh, the tape on Watergate when
Yeah,
that time was that Nixon's secretary inadvertently erased the tape.
inadvertently, right? They said that, but it turned out he had it deleted.
Right.
He had it removed because it made him worse than it turned out what he was, which is all a good, interesting lesson about this. A lot of times, the crime is not the crime that's most important, but the crime
Cover
trying
up.
to cover it up. That's really the problem. And that's what we're seeing with Trump. The Wall Street Journal just this week, I think yesterday, published a letter that they said that Trump wrote at the time when he was traveling back and forth to Jeffrey Epstein's island, and he had praised Epstein, and he drew a naked woman on the letter, making a joke about it. So they didn't publish a picture of the letter. They wrote a story yesterday about how the letter existed, and Trump attacked them viciously, on his Truth Social network. That's where you get everything about Trump. He does everything. It's like his press conferences are on his own social media, which he profits from because he owns it and he's making a bundle from it. But he says he's going to sue the Wall Street Journal. This is Wall Street and Murdoch. The Wall Street Journal is a Republican publication, isn't
It
it? Am I missing
certainly is.
something?
Yes. As I say, it's the chaos that follows Trump around.
The
Uh,
circus.
Now, why this was going on and people were focused on this, the United States Senate voted to cut $9 billion from foreign aid, from national public radio,
Right.
public television. Okay. And that went underneath the radar because people were focused on this. Now that it's done, people are beginning to say, well, what happened here? How did $9 billion get cut from foreign aid and from these public broadcasts
And
that
it
have
wasn't
become
much though
more?
on foreign aid. It was some foreign aid. It wasn't a lot.
No,
It
but it
was
was some
some.
foreign aid, right?
Yeah.
You are correct. Yes. I
But mainly NPR, right? And public
oh I listen, I
radio.
am not a fan of national public radio.
Right.
I think that they have been biased and slanted in the
Yes.
very liberal left-wing direction, frankly, for as long as I can remember.
Yes.
So I never listened to them. Or I
Yeah.
should say, I never, once upon a time I did, but I haven't listened to them at all in the last 10 years. But a lot of people I know do listen to it. And I can understand the Republicans wanting to get rid of it, but I think there should have been a greater debate
Yes.
on the situation than there has been. I think the American people should have really have had an opportunity to weigh in. But getting back to the Epstein, what do you think should happen, Ray?
I think they should completely open it up. We should have a non-Warren commission, okay? Not a government commission, but a private public agent, group of people. Let them investigate everything and tell us the truth. When are we going to get away from this? It's so easy to create conspiracy theories by not releasing information that might offend the politicians who have the power to control these things.
Well, listen, if it's not going to be a government committee, who's going to appoint the members of this commission or committee, whatever you want to call it?
They should pick people from every state, 50 people, one representative, not
Who,
elected,
who,
any non-elected official. I don't know. You're right. It's like
yeah,
it is a quandary when you
that,
don't have a
that's the
good
problem.
leader. Yes.
Who does the picking? How many people will there be? Where will they be from? One from every state. So
Yeah.
you're going to have 50 people on this committee investigating.
Now, it used to be, remember, when Nixon was president, the media was much, I'm not going to say much, very objective. They were very one-sided, but they did better journalism. They were less politically manipulated than they were manipulated. But today they're completely controlled. The right controls the right media, the left controls the left media.
Absolutely.
The Washington Post was in competition with the New York Times and other publications to investigate the Watergate. So there was a competitive move to get to the truth. And that, I think, is what forced the truth to come out. But now the media, you can't trust them because the mainstream, especially the national media, even Trump doesn't even trust his own media, the Wall Street Journal. I thought the Wall Street Journal and Murdoch were his buddies, but I guess they're not. He really slammed Murdoch and called the Wall Street Journal a crappy, waste of time newspaper publication. He put it in the
I was
context of Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel.
I I I thought the Wall Street Journal was the Bible of the Republican Party.
I did too. But people go against religion. So I think this is a big problem for Trump. He realized it and he had to reverse himself this week. And he told Bondi, go ahead, release the grand jury. But now I don't trust them. What's she going to release? She's going to
That's
release what they allow her to release, and they're going to bury stuff the way they did the Kennedy stuff for how many years? 70 years. We never really, what were they hiding? It just,
Well, when he released all the Kennedy stuff, or did he release all the Kennedy stuff?
well, supposedly they finally did, but I've never seen it. They haven't made it available, to a lot of people to read. You got to go through a lot of trouble to get that. And I haven't read any surprises. What were they hiding? Why did they keep it so long?
I don't know.
That's what creates these problems. But I think this is causing a problem for Trump that he totally didn't expect. And it has taken the light away from some of his quote unquote political achievements, getting his budget through, getting these cuts, undermining the public radio. They're getting billions, I guess, from taxpayers. I didn't realize I was paying so much as a taxpayer for NPR. Now, I like some of the programs, but it always did seem to be that they were tiptoeing around bias, a little bit. And it was, it's just sad that the media has, come to that.
Right. Now, the TV, I accept the TV. I think there's a lot of good entertainment on TV. I think there's a lot of good historical documents that, they
Yeah.
talk about. That's good. But the radio, as I say, you get rid of the radio tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. All right. And Bill, your column this week, let's shift to the second part of segment one here. Your column is interesting. You write about the faith and the importance of faith and how it improved in the 1940s and 1950s. But in recent years, there's been a loss in faith since that time. And what impact does that have? Tell us about your column, or if you haven't,
Well,
read it, and then let's talk about it.
here's my commentary for today, right from the middle by William O. Lipinski. This republic has grown, progressed, and prospered since my generation attended grammar school and high school in the 1940s and 1950s. A great deal of the progress has been very good. More rights and acceptance for African Americans, more rights and freedom for women. I can remember when women had to get permission and get the signature of their husband in order to have a credit card. Thank God that is no longer the case. I remember when we never saw an African American on television or in a major daily newspaper, except, of course, if they committed a crime. Both women and African Americans were depicted in movies in subservient, submissive, passive roles. And there have been many other improvements in our land of liberty and fortress of freedom since my generation went to grammar school and high school. But in two enormously important areas, we have lost our way: faith and family. It was faith, a very strong belief in God, supporting and attending our religious services, that I believe blessed us with the courage, conviction, and confidence to fight a civil war to free enslaved people and keep this nation together. We fought and won 2 world wars to save democracy and freedom, not only for ourselves, but for all of mankind. A faith that gives us a very strong physical strength, a moral, mental toughness, and a never doubting religious belief. that supported, with God's help, our ability to carve a modern democratic republic out of this wilderness, a fate that gave us the freedom, the wisdom, the economic power, and military strength to become the leader of the free world and protector of democracy. Unfortunately, alongside of these many advantages that have developed in our democratic republic, we have moved away from God and faith. The decline in church attendance at our land of the free and home of the brave has had very significant negative impact in our society, culturally, socially, and politically. Churches have been historically a place for key social connections in support for people. I believe has caused the decline in church attendance and participation, I believe has caused loneliness and social fragmentation. The less people attending and supporting churches means a significant reduction in volunteerism and charity work. I believe the loss of religious influence leads to relativism and a weaker sense of shared values. Religious institutions once served as a mediating force in public life. I believe their decline has left people more divided along ideological lines. Enormously, unfortunately, because of these many negative impacts on our lives today, our democratic republic, I question whether we are still morally capable of leading the free world against the forces of prejudice, intolerance, terrorism, and dictatorship. And if it is not us, who will or who can? My next column, I will talk about the decline in the American family. No nation or people have ever been very strong, very long, without having a significant belief in God, religion, and family. Thanks for listening to my commentary today, particularly you, Ralph Taylor.
That was a great column, and it reminded me of Ronald Reagan. Like he could have been saying those words. You're just
Great compliment.
Yeah, no, well, let's talk about the topic. It's interesting. I mean, how does what you're saying conflict with or pair with our separation of church and state? I mean, we talk about how you talk about how important faith is. Is that the same as saying religion should be more involved in government? Explain that a little bit from your perspective.
Well, my perspective, I believe that this nation really was founded on a very strong belief in God. And I believe that we have lost our way along those lines. Now, if you practice the Christian religion, the Mohammedan religion, the Jewish religion, the ones from Utah, who are they?
The Mormons, the
Mormons.
Mormons.
I think the key thing in all of those religions is the golden rule. Treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
If that is the case, I don't think you have any trouble with having religion be involved in government. But you have to watch it. You have to be careful. Since we have lost, religion having a strong effect on government, I think it has hurt this nation very severely. I also believe that the more prosperous this nation has grown over the course of the years, less and less people feel a need to believe in God. They're doing very well here. They have their house, their car, they send their kids to college. They don't need, God any longer in their lives. And that has showed up in the significant decline in attending church, attending synagogue, attending mosque across the world. The only group that I know of that has actually increased participation have been the Mormons, which is rather remarkable because theirs is one of the more, if not the strictest, religious organization around today. That's my feelings, Ray.
Yeah, and I think I mean I am against the aspect I support religion in school. For example, I think it's okay to have a time where kids can pray if they want to pray. I know there's some people that are atheists, they're raised non-religious, so I get that, and everybody should be treated fairly and respected. I definitely don't think religion should control government. It can have an influence the way any other political group or activist group or entity out there has an influence. But the last time we saw religion run government was in Europe, and it was called the Inquisition. It wasn't a very good time. Religion can be very severe. And, at the same time, I think religion has the principles, good religion, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Mormons, and many others. They're based on what you said, treat people the way you want them to treat you. Um, so religion is important. I think we have gotten away from religion. I mean, my perspective is that, we've turned away from the importance of religion in the Middle East. This Israeli attack on Gaza, they've killed, every day they kill like 300 people. And some of them are Christians. They just bombed another Christian church. And to me, it always makes me feel sad that America is a Christian country and yet they don't care. They don't seem to care when Christians are killed by the Israelis. The politics trumps the religious aspect. So I would like to see, and I'm not saying that to be anti-Israeli. I support Israel and Palestine. I just don't support the Israeli government, the Likud government. But I think religion coming has a place in government in terms of tempering the fanaticism. And, if it's done right in principled and fair and in a respectful way, which means even respecting things that I don't completely agree with. I don't like the idea of transgenders competing in sports. So men who become women, transgenders, I don't think they should compete in women's sports. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's not because I discriminate against transgenders. I just think it creates an unfairness. So I have a faith in respecting everybody for what they are. I don't hate anybody, but I don't have to agree with, everybody either.
Absolutely not. Now, I'm pro-life. I'm very strongly pro-life,
Right.
but I have never really thought the federal government or the state government should stop anyone from having an abortion if they chose to do so. Because the only entity in the country that I know of any longer is some fundamental Christian groups and the Catholic Church. And I'm a Catholic, born, raised, continue to be. But I don't think I should impose my will in regards to abortion on a country that every time you see a poll, it's 70% think abortion is all right.
Right.
All I can do is pray that and try to change people's minds. And to me, that's the way to go about it.
And my view on abortion, by the way, and I think it does have a lot to do with religion, but at the same time, it has a lot to do with science and biology. When does an embryo become a human? At what point? And I think at that point, abortions should be blocked. Abortions shouldn't be birth control. I know you don't support abortions being birth control either,
Absolutely
but
not.
I do believe that, when somebody is raped and they become pregnant, they should have the option to have an abortion right away. And that's when the embryo is very young, and done very early on. But too often we see abortions take place late in the sixth, seventh, and even eighth month.
I
And
think that's unconscionable.
yes, I agree. So there is a place for abortion, and there is a place for right to life. And sadly, it's become a big political
By the
issue.
same token, I would like to say I don't think that my tax money should be used to pay for abortions for people. I don't think the government should outlaw abortion, but I don't think they ought to be using my money to pay for abortions when I feel as strong as I do against abortion.
Yeah, I agree. Any final thoughts on faith, the issue of faith that you wrote in your column?
Well,
Uh,
no, other than the fact that I sincerely believe that our loss of faith is not helping us continue to be the leader of the free world. And I don't really know if we're up to the challenges in the present or the future without having a stronger overall belief in God and in a religion. That's it.
All right, great column, Bill. Great topic, and we'll be looking forward to that in the Southwest News newspaper group, newspapers of the Reporter newspaper, the Des Plaines Valley News newspaper, and the Southwest News Herald. I'm Ray Hanania with my co-host Bill Lipinski on Two Guys on Politics. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll do our second segment on the challenges in the Middle East and then facing the Netanyahu government. And then I'll talk about my column about who I support in the race to succeed Dick Durbin. We will be right back right after these messages. And welcome back to segment 2 of Two Guys on Politics here at WNZK AM 690 Radio and on the U.S. Arab Radio Network, and also broadcast on YouTube, where it's easy to find us. Just go to youtube.com, type in Two Guys on Politics, or just go to twoguysonpolitics.com and you'll find our podcast audio, video that Bill Lipinski and I do every week, talking about whatever the big news topics are each week in politics, and also our columns that we both write for the newspapers. So one of the topics we were going to talk about is there's Netanyahu started a war. Well, he didn't start the war in Gaza, but it's been going on forever. October 7th, the Hamas terrorists killed 1,200 Israelis. Netanyahu responded, but he's been responding for almost 3 years, killing Palestinians, destroying the property there, the businesses, the homes, and not just killing Hamas, but killing a lot of innocent people, Muslim and Christian. He's bombed every Christian church that exists in the Gaza. And a lot of people don't hear much about Christian churches in Gaza, but there's several. Baptist churches, Protestant churches, and Catholic churches, they've been almost all destroyed by Netanyahu's war. Then Netanyahu expanded the war into Lebanon against Hezbollah. That went on for many months, and then he expanded, and he's been striking them every once in a while. Then he attacked Iran. He launched an attack on Iran. The United States supported him. And I don't know if you saw the news this week where somebody said, well, the U.S. bunker bombs destroyed one of the 3 nuclear centers, but the other 2 are still going strong. So the bragging that President Trump did, he just can't stop himself from exaggerating stuff instead of just telling us the truth. I think it hurts him in the long run. So there's a war in Iran, and now Israel has attacked Syria because Israel has a Druze population that doesn't consider itself Arab and it's not Muslim. So the Israelis have kind of saddled up to the Druze, and the Druze serve in the Israeli military. So they invaded Syria, started bombing the middle of Damascus, the capital of Syria, after the new president of Syria said that he was willing to work with the Israelis, even to secede the Golan Heights, which was Syrian territory, to the Israelis, and still the Israelis went in and attacked Syria. It's a mess. And all that has led to one big thing. So many Israelis have served in the military, they're getting tired of it. There have been so many Israelis that have been killed. And now there's a bill that was introduced that says that the Orthodox Jews, the most conservative religious Jews, must serve in the military. And the religious coalitions that are the foundation of Netanyahu's political party have said, if that goes through, we're going to quit your government and you'll collapse. And that brings more turmoil. Almost, it's kind of ironic. Netanyahu and Trump are facing internal turmoil from their own people. What is it? How significant is this to you and to Americans, do you think?
Well, let me ask you the question. Why is it that Netanyahu has got himself involved in so many wars, other than the wars that he originally got involved with because he was attacked, you
Right.
know, by Hamas, was it? Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. I mean, I can understand that. They killed 12,000 or 1,200 people. But he has, it seems like he's gotten drunk with power.
right.
Uh, and he's going all over the place, attacking countries in the Middle East. And why is he doing that? What is his motivation? Is it because the United States is standing behind him and he's taking this opportunity before he even loses support in the United States to go after people, countries that he wants to go after? I don't know. I don't understand it. I said right off the bat that I supported the Israelis and what they did in Gaza. Okay. I didn't support their tactics, but I supported, getting rid of the people who were trying to kill them. But I said at the time, I felt that he was going about it in the wrong way. And I think, and that was very, very early in the conflict. And I think that is what has caused him to lose support with many, many countries. I
Yeah.
mean, the United States supports him. Who else supports him?
Yeah, listen, Israel is isolating itself, but for Netanyahu, he needs those religious parties. But at this point, with so many Israeli soldiers being killed, being wounded, there are like 500,000 Israeli soldiers that are getting medical treatment in this Gaza war and Lebanon war and Iran war and Syria war, that they need soldiers. One of the agreements that Netanyahu made to form his coalition, because if you take the religious party away, the left has much more support, but it's short of forming a coalition. They have a parliamentary form of government where you got to get 50 plus 1% of the vote and you could patch it together with different political parties. They may have like 30 parties, that have two people or five people or 20 people based on how well a party does in the election. So Netanyahu wasn't able to put together a coalition. So he had to go to the religious parties, and the religious parties are dead set against peace with the Palestinians. The religious parties are behind the settlements that they're building in the West Bank, and they take Palestinian lands, they build a settlement, they cordon off or fence off the Palestinians so they can't go into those areas. It really, some people compare it to like South Africa when they had these Buntastans, before South Africa when it was an apartheid state. And that word is often used by Israel's critics. So the religious parties want an end to any hope for a Palestinian state. And I think without a Palestinian state, the Middle East will be deadlocked in conflict forever.
I
It's a
agree.
price he paid, to stay in power because he has been in power 22 years, originally because of what he said were the betrayals he said by the Palestinians, but then later, as the push for peace started to move forward, the only way to stop it was to create a government that would reject it and throw out the peace accords that were signed. So he's kind of between a rock and a hard place. The only benefit for him is that the Knesset, I guess, ends next week. Their parliament closes next week, and they're out for 3 months, which means that maybe this won't have to be decided until the middle of the fall in October. So what does that mean for these conflicts that we keep seeing that the U.S. we fund it? Whatever Israel fires in Syria, whatever missile, that's a missile that we have to pay for as taxpayers, American taxpayers. The Israelis are not paying for any of those missiles. It's us. Obviously, they're paying for it with lives when they're killed, but so are so many other people with weapons that we're giving Israel. And I know that many of a growing number of Republicans are upset with him, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who by the way, I can't say enough how much I like her. She's more to the center than a lot of other Republicans, and she wants to stop giving any money to foreign countries. She wants all that money to go to Americans. And she wants to get rid of the illegal aliens too. She's a very pro-American American. That's what I like about her.
Sounds like she's your candidate for president next time around, Ray.
You know what? Until I see a better Democrat, which I don't see a good Democrat at all, I think she may actually get the support of the America Party that Elon Musk is putting together. What do you think about this whole Middle East? Does it bother you that we're dragged into these things financially and even sometimes militarily?
Oh, it bothers me a great deal. Absolutely, there's no question about it. I can understand supporting Israel. I've always supported Israel. I will continue to do so. But I think that we have to have greater checks and balances on what the Israelis do, okay? Because we are funding them. I mean, and it's our military might that keeps them alive in the Middle East. It was really us, recognizing them back in 1948 that have allowed them to build a government that they have built over there. But we should exercise more influence on the Israelis. I think it would help the overall situation because in order to have peace in the Middle East, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm far from being an expert, is you have to have a state for the Palestinians, okay? And you have to have the coming together of other nations in the Middle East with the Israelis based upon some common ground of perhaps economic improvement for the entire region.
Yeah, the Saudis have said they would consider signing a peace deal with Israel, and then many other Arab countries would follow if they did it, on the condition that the Israelis supported a Palestinian state. And the Israelis, with this right-wing government that's driven by the religious parties, are absolutely against it. And it's really caused a real breakdown and problem between the two countries.
Ray, do you remember exactly who was it that first advocated the two-state solution?
Well, originally it was Edward Said and Ibrahim Abu-Lughod. He was a Northwestern political science professor. They went to the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and Arafat embraced the idea. So then they went to the U.S. They started talking after the Israelis and Egyptians made peace. And then the Intifada started in 1990. They thought they needed to prevent Hamas from rising. And the best way to do that was to create a peace accord with Israel because Hamas began in the 1990s as a military force that rivaled the secular Palestinian leadership and Arafat. So Arafat was always against Hamas. But the way the two areas were divided, the West Bank and Gaza, and the control that Israel had between the two, Arafat never really had control over Gaza at all. So Hamas continued to grow. So it's always been a problem. And it grew from there, and it almost went until the Israelis killed Yitzhak Rabin, their prime minister, for signing the accord with Arafat. And Ariel Sharon and Netanyahu came into power and basically put Arafat in a prison. They locked him down in Ramallah, in a village in the West Bank, preventing him from doing anything. And then they broke all of the agreements because fundamentally they're against any peace accord because the land is so small. Palestinians and Israelis living on the same land, they argue there isn't enough room for both together. It's either one or the other. So that was always a big
Didn't
problem.
they live that way for a couple of centuries?
Well, in all honesty, my dad grew up in Palestine, and Palestine was predominantly Muslim and Christian, and there was a Jewish population. And the Jewish population was a minority population until World War II, when no, believe me, the Allies, we did a lot to destroy the Nazis. The Holocaust was horrible, all the Jews that were killed by the Nazis, but nobody wanted the Jews. The Americans didn't
That's
want the
true.
Jews, the British didn't want the Jews, and they thought, let's send them to Palestine where they can create their own state. That was their strategy, and that's why we ended up with the problem in Palestine because the Arabs believed that they should have a state that would be Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, a holy land that everybody shared, not controlled by one religion. And that problem has never been solved, and it just keeps getting worse. It's a horrible, situation where so many people have died. And I don't see an answer to it, especially when you have like a far right leader like Netanyahu. And Israel has been away from the labor liberal movement for 22 years, and it looks like they're losing control. It's mainly Russian immigrants, Russian Jews from the Soviet Union that escaped that are the most conservative because they lived under the oppression of Stalin and the Russians, and they don't want to live like that again, and they fear the Arabs are like that. So they completely oppose anything that has to do with sharing the land with Christians and Muslims.
What is the population of Israel?
I believe it's 12 million. I'd have to look at it, maybe
Okay.
14 million. And that includes, I think, uh, maybe 4,000 Christians and Muslims. And then you have the West Bank and Gaza, which has about 2 million, or in Gaza that has like 2 million Palestinians. There were something like about 100,000 settlers in Gaza that left, and then they surrounded Gaza and turned it into an open air prison. They weren't going to allow the Palestinians to create their own government in Gaza. So whatever was done never ended up being what it was supposed to be in either case. And they both blame each other, but nobody ever gets to the core that both sides are responsible and both sides have contributed to it, and both sides have, Hamas and the Likud really have driven this to the conflict that it's at. So, an unresolvable problem that unfortunately you and me, Bill, are more money goes into the Israel than what I put into out of my taxes and what I put into Social Security, which Trump screwed us on, by the way. But let me talk about my quick column.
Yes, please
We have
do so.
about 5 minutes left here, max. So my column is about who should succeed Dick Durbin as a U.S. Senator. And there are three candidates, leading candidates. And this column is at Hanania.com. You could read the whole column there. And instead of reading the whole column, I like to just summarize it. The three candidates are Juliana Stratton, who is the lieutenant government and has the backing of Daddy Warbucks, Governor J.B. Pritzker. But you know what? He's not giving her a lot of money. I think he only gave her $7,000. And then five-term U.S. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. Now, nobody can say his last name, but they do know how to say Raja because Raja spends a lot of money addressing that issue, and he's done that over the past 7 to 8 of the 10 years that he's been in Congress. His first year, he didn't focus on his name, but in the last 6 to 8 years, he's sold the name as a strategy to build his popularity. And then there's five-term Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who's from the second district south of Chicago, which includes Matteson, Kankakee, and goes all the way down to Danville, goes straight down south of Chicago. Now, the nice thing I like about Kelly over Krishnamurthy or Raja and Juliana Stratton is that Stratton was under the shadow of Pritzker. She really didn't do much. She's a nice person, but I can't think of one major piece of legislation that she fought for that made a difference for voters in Illinois. And Roger Krishnamurthy is the same way. I went through his list of what he supported. Now, he votes to support a lot of typical Democratic issues, but he never really identified with any particular issue, like fighting for the rights of, whatever. He's a decent guy. Like I said, he's India. He's from India. He was born in New Delhi, but he was raised in Peru. I'm sorry, in Peoria. He was raised in Peoria, and a lot of Democrats like him because they see a challenge coming from Darren LaHood, who is Lebanese American from Peoria, and Darren LaHood is going to be the Republican, probably the Republican nominee in the race next year in the general election to succeed Durbin. Who it'll be from the Democrats, we're not quite sure. Raja has raised something like $19 million. Kelly only has 2.2 million, and Juliana Stratton, hers is like less than 1 million, from what I can tell. So it looks like if you go by money, Raja Krishnamurthy may have it locked in, but Kelly has done so much when it comes to legislation and fighting for taxpayers. And I go through a whole litany of all her legislation in my column at Hanania.com. You could read that, all her work and legislation on health care, prevention of gun violence. She introduced so many bills on improving education for kids, strengthening our technology and infrastructure. It's just a whole list. I mean, you just can't stop reading. She has introduced more legislation than most members of Congress. And you know that a lot of times, you go along with whatever the congressional leadership wants you to go along with. But it comes down to this. You're going to elect Krishnamurthy, who is basically a populist, who the party leaders like because he's politically safer? Or do you support Kelly, who was a little more independent, a Democrat, and who's done so much to help the need of the taxpayers? The only thing, last thing I talk about in the column is how originally I didn't like Durbin. Durbin in 1982 was elected to Congress by defeating Paul Finley in the 20th Congressional District. Paul Finley was a U.S. Navy veteran, a military veteran of our military, and he was the most outspoken critic of Israel because of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty on June 8th, 1967, when I think it was 34 U.S. sailors were killed by the Israelis in that attack. 34 American veterans killed, and 173 American veterans on the USS Liberty who were seriously injured. And it was buried at the time because the Israelis said, oh, we made a mistake. But that attack went on for hours, and so many people were killed. And the Israelis thought that the USS Liberty would share its communications. It was a communications or spy ship, they said, and they were afraid they'd share that information and the U.S. would realize what Israel was really doing in 1967, launching the war, and that Egypt never really had a chance of starting a war then. So he was probably the biggest critic of that, and I always admired him for that. But Durbin beat him. But so I never really liked Durbin. But when he became a U.S. Senator, his whole attitude changed on the Middle East. And he's been very moderate, very centrist, supportive of Palestinians and Israelis. He's done the right thing, and I admired him for that. But I still think Kelly, if you want to pick somebody who's going to do something and roll up her sleeves, I think she's the best candidate.
Well, I have two comments on that. One, I think that Dick Durbin changed his spots very, very significantly from the time he was first elected to Congress. He
Oh, yeah.
became more and more and more liberal in order to gain greater and greater influence in the Democratic Party. Some can criticize him for it. Some say he grew, he expanded himself. Okay.
Right.
It's up to you to make the decision. He and I were both very conservative when we came to Congress. I stayed the way I was. I was stuck in the mud. I didn't change my position. No matter what the National Democrats wanted me to do, I represented the people who sent me to Congress, okay? The other thing is, I think that, Durbin brought in a senator by the name of Tammy Duckworth. It was
Right.
his influence, the money he raised, a senator who, frankly, I don't think has done much of anything other than do exactly what Dick Durbin wanted her to do. So for those two reasons, I'm not a big fan of Durbin. As far as your candidate, anyone that I've mentioned her to thinks she's a very solid individual, that she is more independent than anyone else that's running, but she doesn't have a chance against Raja.
Because
That man has done a fantastic job in getting people
right.
to call him Raja And to think the sun rises and sets on his head. And one of the reasons for that is the $19 million that he has
Yes,
spent.
he
So
is.
I think it's going to be Raja no matter what anybody else has to say.
Yeah,
Now,
and that's
general election
unfortunate.
might be a different story because LaHood, if it is LaHood, I think is a very good candidate.
Yeah, I think LaHood is more of a centrist conservative, and I think
Yes,
he can do pretty well. But right, it's sad that we go toward a guy who's known more for his name than his legislation. And
very true.
people have been emailing me and saying they don't call him Raja, call him Nada because he hasn't introduced or done anything in 8 years. You'd think there'd be one piece of legislation rather than your name that you could sell to the voters and say, hey, I champion senior citizens and the elimination of the tax on Social Security, which is how Trump won much of his senior citizen base and then broke that promise in this last budget bill. So anyway, that's where it stands. Bill, we're at the end of our line here anyway, so I just want to say thank you and tell everybody thank you for listening to us.
It's always a pleasure, Ray. Look forward to seeing you and hearing you next week.
All right, we'll talk again. Thanks everybody for listening. Remember, go to twoguysonpolitics.com and sign up and subscribe. It's free and follow us, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye, everybody.